Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Venice Honganji Buddhist Temple's Fujinkai Memorial Service. My name is Linda Oshinomi and I am the 2022 Fujinkai co-president along with Vicky Tokirio. Today, we will be honoring the many Fujinkai members who have passed away over the years. We will be reading all of their names after the Sutra chanting. This service is held in conjunction with the 94th Memorial of Lady Takeko Kujo, who founded the Fujinkai program and established its activities in the Honganji tradition. We are also holding this service in memory of Esshinni-sama and Kakushi-sama, wife and daughter of Shinran Shonin, the two women who kept the memory and teachings of Shinran Shonin alive so we may appreciate and learn from them today.
皆さん、おはようございます。今年度のベニス本願寺婦人会キサラギ並びにエシミに隠しにおよび婦人会専門上法要にご参拝ありがとうございます。私の名前はビキトキリオで、リンダ・オシノミと共に2022年の婦人会会長です。本日は坂に亡くなられた婦人会をメンバーを思い法要でございます。その方々の名前をお経を唱えるときに呼び上げます。Kisaragiは婦人会を設立なさった九条武子様の追悼法要で、今回は九条武子様が亡くなられてから94年目を幕えます。また、Shinran Shoninの奥様であったEsshinni-samaのお嬢さんであったKakushi-samaの思いを馳せる法要でもございます。今日、私たちがShinran様の見教えを味わうことができるのはこのお二人のおかげだと言えます。
So please join us in chanting Sanbutsuge.
Kansho.
To the families and friends who have lost Fujinkai members, thank you for joining us today. As I read the members' names, please offer Oshoko at any time during the reading.
先に亡くなられた婦人会メンバーのご家族またはお友達にご参拝くださいましてありがとうございます。聖母者のお名前を読み上げますので、その時にどうぞお焼香や合唱をしてください。
Our departed friends in Dharma who were formerly Fujinkai members include the following. Mrs. Koyu Taniyama, Mrs. Taki Nakamura, Mrs. Yao Nakamura, Mrs. Fusako Nishihara, Mrs. Sumie Watari, Mrs. Kyoko Matsuda, Mrs. Tamayo Nakamura, Mrs. Yachio Mitsunaga, Mrs. Motome Okamoto, Mrs. Takeno Hamazawa, Mrs. Yuriko Kanemoto, Mrs. Sato Kanda, Mrs. Kikuo Hata, Mrs. Shigeno Kuda, Mrs. Haruo Shimoto, Mrs. Tomoe Omote, Mrs. Naoko Morita, Mrs. Sayo Nakagiri.
Mrs. Yukiko Takemoto, Mrs. Haru Fujimoto, Mrs. Shimano Furuya, Mrs. Hideo Hisamoto, Mrs. Namiko Yamaki, Mrs. Masuyo Nakao, Mrs. Haru Ozaki, Mrs. Osame Hojo, Mrs. Yoko Waki, Mrs. Setsuko Soyejima, Mrs. Bun Kishimoto, Mrs. Shizue Okubo, Mrs. Hisa Deguchi, Mrs. Miyoko Yumori, Mrs. Mary M. Yasuda, Mrs. Terumi Yamaoka, Mrs. Haruyo Nishikubo, Mrs. Misao Matsumoto, Mrs. Kiwayo Kudubu.
Mrs. Kazue Doi, Mrs. Hanayo Inokuchi, Mrs. Tomiko Morimasu, Mrs. Katsuko Kuda, Mrs. Yasue Yamada, Mrs. Takeko Sakaoye, Mrs. Kane Nakamizo, Mrs. Kameyo Tsunoda, Mrs. Hatsue Takaki, Mrs. Matsuko Margo Noguchi, Mrs. Yasu Yamamoto, Mrs. Hatsuko Akioka, Mrs. Amy Okafuji, Mrs. Shigeko Lin Shimoka, Mrs. Miyuki Jean Waki, Mrs. Hideo Katayama, Mrs. Toshi Shishino, Mrs. Hatsue Somen.
Mrs. Chiyoko Tanabiki, Mrs. Shigeko Fujihiro, Mrs. Shigeko Haraga, Mrs. Mary M. Kujubu, Mrs. Hisaye Nakagiri, Mrs. Fumiko Yamamoto, Mrs. Helen Toyoshima, Mrs. Akiko Tateishi, Mrs. Kyoko Kita, Mrs. Masako Morita, Mrs. Michika Ishii, Mrs. Teruko Oshige, Mrs. Masaye Kato, Mrs. Tomiko Maeda, Mrs. Akiko Yamada, Mrs. Mitsuye Imanishi, Mrs. Mei Izuhara, Mrs. Chieko Miyake, Mrs. Tamaye Tochioka.
Mrs. Namuko Sasaki, Mrs. Akimi Maeda, Mrs. Emiko Fukuda, Mrs. Shizuko Matsubara, Mrs. Aiko Kusaba, Mrs. Margaret Okoda, Mrs. Janet Ueda, Mrs. Kimi Igawa, Mrs. Nancy Nakagiri, Mrs. Yoshiko Morita, Mrs. Akiko Mitsui, Mrs. Janet Mitsui Brown, Mrs. Matsue Fujikado, Mrs. Yuriko Lillian Kuwata, Mrs. Betty Shinmoto, Mrs. Trey Shiraki, Mrs. Yukiko Yumori, Mrs. Harue Ueki, Mrs. Velma Yoshida.
Mrs. Chiyoko Uehara, Mrs. Shirley Takeuchi, Mrs. Ethel Sato, Mrs. Yoshiko Udagawa, Mrs. Mitsuye Fukumoto, Mrs. Arlene Hamashita, Mrs. Ume Kita, Mrs. Mie Ino, Mrs. Cynthia Uehara, Mrs. Hiroko Morita, Mrs. Masayo Ueda, Mrs. Mary Nakagiri, Mrs. Kazuko Kadamatsu, Mrs. Kei Masamitsu, Mrs. Toshi Ashikaga, Mrs. Ruth Midori Takahashi, Mrs. Sharon Kumagai, Mrs. Betty Matsumoto, and Mrs. Michiko Yamashita.
Please rise for our first Gatha Seiya.
これから聖夜を歌います。
星の夜空の
peaceful night. How beautiful the starry sky! Who could know the mystery of the heavens? When these countless eyes shine brilliantly, my heart is filled with joy. More numerous than the sounds of the Ganges are the Buddhas. When I hear that they watch over us night and day, my heart is filled with peace. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Reverend Kory Quon will now introduce our special guest speaker for today's service.
クワン先生は今日の法要の特別ご講師様を紹介します。
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining today for this Esshinni, Kakushi-ni, Takeko Kujo, and BWA Memorial. We have a wonderful guest speaker today. Maybe you heard I'm kind of related. Well, luckily, because of my wife's family, I'm kind of related to a lot of people, I guess. Through the Nishinas, we're related. And so I've been wanting to get at least, one of the Oshitas to be able to come physically here. And unfortunately, we can't do that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to come today either. So we weren't sure we're going to have a temple today. Luckily, I guess our new roof has been pushed back, hopefully not more than a week, but you can see that I'm here today. So, introducing our guest speaker today, Reverend Patti Oshita. She was born and raised outside of Fresno in a place called Fowler. Some of our members are from there, so it's not so small. It's a small town, but we're all family somehow. She's the oldest of 3 children, born to Chuck and Jean Idetta. In 1985, she moved to Sacramento and worked for Congressman Robert Matsui for almost 7 years. She then returned to school and received her BA in Humanities and Religious Studies from the California State University, Sacramento in 1995. She retired from the California Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, as a manager in the Human Resources Department in September of 2012, and joined the Sacramento Buddhist as a program development coordinator shortly thereafter. In 2014, she helped Reverend Bob with services until they both retired in September of 2016. She is one of the 2 original leaders of the Betsuing Girl Scout troop that began with 7 girls 30 years ago. Today, the troop has around 100 girls and more than 50 leaders. Reverend Patti received her Tokudo ordination in 2003 and Kyoshi certification in 2007. She is married to Reverend Bob Oshita and enjoys her spare time watching the Food Network, cooking shows, shopping, and practicing yoga when she has time. I can't believe you guys have been retired for over 5 years already. That's why I had to pause after the 2016. But again, we're very fortunate to have her joining us today. Hopefully in the future, her and Sensei can come and physically and give us a sermon together, or one or the other. Yeah, but we'd be very happy to have you physically here. And as an extension of our Venice family, we'd be overjoyed to be able to reconnect in that way with our ABBA recruitment station and other amenities. Anyways, thank you, Sensei, for joining us today. And we're very, just, thank you. Everyone, Reverend Patti Oshita.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Reverend Kory, for your nice introduction. We are family. I didn't realize that until this morning. So, hey, cuz. Thank you, Vicki and Linda, for the kind invitation to be your guest speaker this morning. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces online. And I think this may be the first time I'm addressing the Venice BWA as a guest speaker. So really, I am truly honored. I hope everyone is staying safe. The last 2 years have been challenging years, but I hope all of you have received your vaccines and booster and are staying safe. I also hope that you have been keeping in contact with each other by phone calls, texts, and emails. And I understand we have not had this service for the past 2 years, so it's especially nice to be able to meet even by Zoom. We are here this morning to observe this special service remembering BWA members who have passed away and to appreciate the lives of 3 very special women of Jodo Shinshu: Esshinni-ko, Kakushini, Shinran's wife and daughter, and the founder of BWA, Lady Takeko Kujo. Esshinni-ko and Kakushini are significant for many reasons. Interestingly, although Shinran Shonin is one of the most well-known religious figures in the history of Japan, there were scholars about 100 years ago that actually debated whether Shinran ever really existed at all. It's hard to believe that now, but it's true. Just as some scholars of English literature, even today, debated whether William Shakespeare actually lived or if he wrote his many plays. And William Shakespeare lived only 450 years ago. How much more so for Shinran, who lived 800 years ago. There was actually a similar debate regarding Shinran. Some scholars debated the fact that he may not have ever even existed. But in 1921, 10 very unique letters were discovered in the archives of the Honpa Honganji in Kyoto. These letters were written by Shinran's wife, Esshinni, to her daughter, Kakushini. These letters confirmed Shinran's marriage and absolutely validated the existence of Shinran. Esshinni's letters, found centuries after they lived, left no doubt about Shinran's life, his work, and of course, his marriage to Esshinni. In a way, not only did she and Kakushini help keep Shinran's teaching alive after he passed away, but with Esshinni's letters, she guaranteed that Shinran's actual life and his work would never be doubted. Esshinni is certainly a significant woman of Jodo Shinshu. And it was through the dedicated efforts of Esshinni's daughter Kakushini that the seed of all Jodo Shinshu temples, Honganji itself, was planted and grew. After Shinran died, Kakushini was overwhelmed to see so many devoted followers of Shinran coming to Kyoto to pay their respects at Shinran's gravesite. She had the first Otani Honbyo built, and this 8-sided building would hold, or 6-sided building would hold the ashes of Shinran. Otani Honbyo was the beginning of the Jodo Shinshu Nishi Honganji that we know today. Because of Esshinni and Kakushini, Jodo Shinshu was established and would eventually come to the United States with our Issei pioneers. Lady Takeko Kujo was born in 1887. She was the daughter of Koson Otani, the 21st head of Honganji. Her public life began during the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, when she co-founded the Buddhist Women's Association, which was active in sending care packages to soldiers at the front and to helping families who had lost their sons in combat. In 1909, she entered into an arranged marriage with Baron Kujo Yoshimatsu. She went to England, where her husband attended Cambridge University. And she returned to Japan after 1 year, leaving her husband in London. The couple lived apart for most of their lives. After the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, which devastated Kyoto and the surrounding Kanto region, Lady Kujo sponsored various humanitarian efforts, which led to the reconstruction of the Tsukiji Honganji Temple and the foundation of the Asoka Hospital, one of Japan's first modern medical centers. She was able to do all of this by organizing the women in the temple, laying the foundation for the creation of BWA. Lady Kujo was also a noted poet and wrote numerous poems and gathas about her Nembutsu faith. And she wrote the beautiful Gatha Seiya that we heard earlier this morning. Today, we are also remembering our Venice BWA women who have helped to maintain our organization and our temple over the years. Going back generations, these women may have been our mother, our grandmothers, and many more that have impacted on our lives. Because of so many wonderful people, we're able to gather on this February, Saturday of 2022, and hear the Nembutsu teaching. When my husband, Reverend Bob, and I were the chaplains for the California State Assembly, we would close each reflection reciting on Nembutsu. But we would define Nembutsu as being kindness and gratitude beyond words. Kindness and gratitude beyond words. To live with kindness and gratitude beyond words is to live a life of Nembutsu. To me, this is also love. For to love is to feel and to share kindness and caring beyond words. This month of February, we also celebrate Valentine's Day, the Hallmark created National Day dedicated to LOVE, love. Here's a bit of advice that Reverend Bob and I would share with teenagers before we retired. Be very careful in your romantic pursuits, for the person you marry is the only person you get to choose in your family. We cannot choose our parents, our brothers or sisters. We cannot choose our children. In our family, we can only choose our husband or wife, and they will impact on every part of our life. Knowing how significant this choice is, the Buddha might say, choose wisely. I think all of us listening to this talk can quietly reflect on the karmic circumstances and the choices we have made in our own lives to see how true this is. If we were not at a certain place or at a certain time with the people we were with, perhaps we would not have met the person we married. Perhaps we would have made another choice and turned left instead of right. The choices we make in our lives can be not only life-shaping, but life-changing. And when we reflect on these choices, the question remains, did we choose wisely? I know personally, if I had chosen differently, I would certainly not be here today speaking to all of you. I have always been afraid of public speaking. As a young child, my parents seemed to always put me into programs that required me to speak or to perform publicly, something that my sister and brother were not made to do. I attended Nihon Gakko for 8 years, and every year we had our annual Gakugekai. I always had to give a speech. I took piano lessons, and although I did not have to speak, every year, and sometimes twice a year, we would have piano recitals and I would have to perform. This only led to playing the piano and the organ for church services, and later even playing for weddings. It was, I think, 1980 that I was the organist for my best friend's brother's wedding that I met Reverend Bob. He was a friend and guest of the groom. We were placed at the same table at the reception, and I remember thinking, that this guy was funny, but he was so old. I've seen this old man before, but at the reception, we sat next to each other and really had conversation. I do remember telling him that, or I remember him telling me that he would like to introduce me to his single younger brother. I didn't buy the story for a moment, but a few years later, we re-met, and here I am today, almost 40 years later. Was this a wise choice? I think the Buddha would say, Bob chose wisely. But this is what we are taught in Buddhism. In the blink of an eye, the moment we are living becomes a part of our past. Everything is constantly in motion, constantly changing. And each morning we awake to a day that's to never come again. We all know this truth that every day is unique and special and never to come again. We also know the reality that every day we are able to live is a unique and special gift, never to come again. But too easily and too often we tend to lose sight of the reality that every day and every moment we are able to be with people whose lives give meaning to our own is one that we must treasure and cherish, especially for those who are closest to us. We tend to too easily and too often take them for granted. But as I've often said, each time we come to the temple and each time we sit here in our hondo, we are reminded to see again what is really of value in living each day. Especially when we attend a special memorial service like this. Even more, we look into the mirror of the Dharma and we see again what is really of value in living each day. And when we see and feel again what is that really gives meaning to our lives, we remember again to live with real appreciation. In other words, when we realize how empty our lives would be without certain people or things, then our Dharma eyes of gratitude open and we feel true appreciation. When I think of moments I was feeling empty and suddenly felt great appreciation, many things come to my mind. As I was preparing for this service, I thought of this memorable and I would say even unforgettable moment in my life. When I was first dating Bob in Los Angeles almost 40 years ago, I worked for an aerospace company called TRW. And one of our early dates, he picked me up right after work and we went right to the movies. There was a theater in the Kansho area that would show some great samurai movies. And one of my favorites was playing, Zatoichi. Katsu Shintaro was one of my favorite Chambara samurai actors. Have many of you heard of Zatoichi? Well, there was a remake of Zatoichi a few years ago, but Katsu Shintaro, the original Zatoichi, was in almost 30 movies. And if you are a fan of the original Zatoichi with Katsu Shintaro, you know that in every movie, he would have a few eating and drinking scenes. And in these eating scenes, Zatoichi would always enjoy his food with much enthusiasm. He would eat his meals like they were few and far between. And being Japan, the meal scenes were almost always rice. Sometimes just a bowl of rice. Sometimes chazuke, a bowl of rice with tea. And sometimes a huge rice ball, which we call onigiri or musubi. And he would eat and have rice all over his face. And he always made it look so good. Well, as I mentioned, Bob picked me up right after work and we went to the early showing of Zatoichi. I was actually getting really hungry, but it was early in our dating, so I never said a word, so we just went to the show. Anyway, when one of the eating scenes began, I remember well that Zatoichi was gobbling down this huge onigiri rice ball. It was then that Bob leaned over and said to me, "Boy, that sure looks good." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you want an onigiri?" I said, "Yeah." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 onigiri and handed one to me. It was made with nori on the outside and umeboshi on the middle. Yummers. It looked like this. It was so delicious to watch Zatoichi eating his onigiri while we ate ours. That was a memorable date that evening. And I said those 3 little words to him for the very first time. When he handed me the onigiri, I looked at him and said, "You're so weird." Looking back, I can see that those onigiri literally filled an emptiness I felt in my life. So more specifically in my stomach. But I sure did appreciate them. And I can admit now that I felt a deep gratitude for the weirdness of this man who would in time become my husband. But seriously, the decisions we make in choosing our significant relationships in life are certainly important. And the karma of our lives are created not only by the things we do and the decisions we make, but also the things we choose not to do and the things that we fail to pursue. Sometimes our choosing wisely can become historic. Let me give you a few examples of historic choices made that have shaped our shared Jodo Shinshu history. Shinran's decision to leave Mount Hiei after 20 years led him to meeting Honen and was the beginning of our Jodo Shinshu sect. Esshinni's decision to marry Shinran carefully preserved her letters, but 700 years later, be the proof that validated beyond doubt Shinran's actual existence. Kakushi-ni's decision to build a mausoleum to create a place where Shinran's disciple could visit created Otani Honbyo and Nishi Honganji. And Takeko Kujo's decision to dedicate her life to establishing hospitals to help heal those in need led to the founding of the first Fujinkai BWA in Japan. There is no doubt that in their lifetimes, these women of Jodo Shinshu chose wisely, and because of them, we are here today. The karmic events of their lives, the decisions they live with, and the history-making choices they made continue to impact on our lives today. And today, with the special women of Jodo Shinshu service, we say to them with our Gassho and Nembutsu, thank you, thank you, thank you. These were the great women of Jodo Shinshu. But as I was imagining the wonderful women of Jodo Shinshu from the Venice BWA that we are remembering today, I found myself thinking about one wonderful woman from my hometown of Fowler, California, where I grew up. As I mentioned earlier, Nembutsu is like the feeling of love. Real love is so deep, it cannot be measured. We could only experience it, and it comes in many unexpected forms. Nembutsu is like the feeling of love and appreciation we have for our family and friends whose love and life lessons have made us who we are. Such love and gratitude are so deep, they can never be measured. But we feel it. We remember and reflect on the nurturing hands whose fingerprints will forever remain on our lives. And often it is only after the passing of many years that we appreciate their loving kindness It is sometimes only in looking back in our lives with mature eyes that we realize what people and interactions have impacted us so significantly. And this, it could come in many unexpected forms. Recently, we have been cleaning out our kitchen in preparation for our kitchen remodeling. We have so much stuff. But among the things I found tucked away in the unreachable corners were cans of green tea, now too old to brew. But as I was opening them and thinking, mottainai, the smell of the tea leaves evoked a buried memory from my very early childhood. I remember our family garden where we had fruit trees, vines of grapes and vegetables, and rows of tea plants. I was very small and it was hot out there, so it must have been summer. My bachan would take me out there with her to pick vegetables and fruits almost daily. The smell of the tea brought back a memory of my bachan showing me how to pick tea leaves. I remember the heat and the smell of the freshly picked leaves. I remember being with bachan, laying out the leaves in the shed, taking away any debris, cutting them into smaller pieces to dry, and then later helping her, putting them into bags that she would proudly give to family and friends. But most of all, I remember how each evening we would have tea for dinner. Tea that was made from the leaves the bachan grew. And we picked and dried and packed together. I had completely forgotten that we did that. But that memory came flooding back to me, and I had to stop what I was doing to fully recall that long ago memory. And I was suddenly, for a minute, I felt like a young child, remembering the loving care bachan gave to those tea leaves as well as her vegetables. She was always very generous in sharing what we were able to give. And I remember again the wonderful flavor of the special tea that we had for dinner every night. The brewing of fresh tea was unbelievable, but taken for granted at my young age. Only now do I appreciate even more the many things bachan taught me and just being with her. That memory gave me a glimpse of Onembutsu, love and gratitude I've had in my life. Today, we gather for this special Venice BWA service. If we are fortunate to be a part of a nurturing community of friends and family, then in time, every month will bring to mind loving family and friends. For in living life, it is inevitable that we must know loss. These services are reminders that in life we must live with Dharma eyes open. We must live not taking for granted our good health or the time we are able to be with our dear friends and family. For we are taught to live with the awareness of impermanence. It has been an honor to be asked to share the Dharma with you today. And in living our lives, let us continue to choose wisely. Let us stay vigilant, wear our masks, sanitize, and remain sheltered until it is safe to gather again. In closing, please join me in Gassho. Today, with this special Women of Jodo Shinshu service, with our Gassho Nembutsu, we say to these significant women of Jodo Shinshu, arigato, arigato, arigato. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Namo Amida Butsu.
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 Namo.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you so much, Reverend Oshita, for your message this morning.
Oshita sensei, gohoi wa domo arigatou gozaimasu.
Please rise for our final Gatha, Ondokusan.
次は最後の三仏家、音読さんです。
Such is the benevolence of Amida's great compassion that we must strive to return it, even to the breaking of our bodies. Such is the benevolence of the masters and true teachers that we must endeavor to repay it, even to our bones becoming dust. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Nos.
Thank you all for coming to today's special service. We'd like to thank our guest speaker, Reverend Patti Oshita, our officiant, Reverend Kory Quon, our AV crew, Carrie Tokirio, Ron G for making videos of Sutra chanting and Gathas, and our organist, Julia Ueda, for making this service possible. Kory Sensei, would you please lead us in closing Gassho?
Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everyone.